Rethinking the Christian Funeral. I must confess that when I submitted this topic, I had to think about 3 or 4 days before I did. And fortunately, I was inspired by a class that my Intro to Public Worship class at Canada. And we were studying the Christian funeral, and I have several pastors in that class, and a lot of them said, I don't think we think about funerals, we just do them. And it kind of set up a chain reaction of people's response in the class to the fact that, yeah, you know, so-and-so just kind of handles that. And so if someone dies, you know, you call Reverend Ford. You know, Reverend Ford is in charge of funerals. And if I'm in town as the senior pastor, you know, it's a mega church, I'll preach. But, you know, now who passed away? Oh, I don't know them. Well, Reverend Ford, you do that. I will, Mrs. So-and-so's husband, oh yes, well, I'll be there for you. And are any of you guilty of that? You know, of just kind of saying, well, we'll pass this off to someone else, unless it's someone that you know.
I'm the one who does.
Okay, so you know about this. When I was organist and choir minister of music at the Hartford Memorial Baptist Church in Detroit, Michigan. I get my two churches mixed up because they're so similar. Just my current church is so much smaller. But Hartford Memorial Baptist Church had about 10,000 members in Detroit. Very large church, very unique congregation. But there just was hardly a week with that many people that there were not some funerals going on in the church. And I mean, in fact, we soon determined that there were probably more funerals that were held in the sanctuary than actual worship services. So when you think about it like that, you have to ask, well, what kind of importance are we putting on this? Or is there just this template that we have that we just kind of say, well, whoever passes, pass it on to Reverend Packwood, yeah, call Reverend Packwood, he handles that. As if, you know, that's kind of dirty work, you know, that's for his desk. We got to call Reverend Packwood. Because I think we get so caught up in the day-to-day of life that we don't think about those who are really grieving in the way that we would if that death angel had knocked at our door or the door of one of our families. It was in that class that I assigned, and I am so embarrassed to say this, and I don't have a handout, but I do want you to write this down. There are a few notes that I think you may enjoy taking. I have a message into Tom G. Long. I don't know if you know Tom Long. He's a professor of homiletics, taught at Princeton for many years, and was on our faculty at Emory. But Tom is just a master homiletician and an absolutely great person. He wrote this book. It's interesting. He wrote this book. He spent almost 15 years in research for this book. And the title of the book is Accompany Them with Singing. Accompany Them with Singing, the Christian Funeral. Accompany Them with Singing, the Christian Funeral. The book is published by Westminster John Knox. Westminster John Knox, which is a publishing company in Louisville, Kentucky. The year of publication was 2013, so it's pretty recent. There is a wonderful little clip, and I didn't want to use our time today to do that, but I guess I could have shown a little video clip of Tom actually talking about it, being interviewed about his book. It's just a short clip, but he kind of talks about why it was that what brought about his writing this book. And much of it had to do with exactly what we've just talked about. How perhaps little interest or very little attention is given to the Christian funeral. It's just something that happens. I know churches that pretty much have a template, you know, I don't care whose funeral you go to, it's going to be the same thing. Prelude, procession, hymn, you know, it's just like you just fill in the template because this is the way we do funerals. And then occasionally we get this pushback from a family or a group that has this special request for what they want done, and then all of the pits of the underground break out. In that, some churches say, these are the hymns we sing. We always do blessed assurance. We always do this and this. And of course you have this thing, well, her favorite hymn was, his favorite hymn was, or the family wants to hear. Now, that one's a little different when you say the family wants to hear, because we think about, well, who is serving, who the funeral is really for in terms of a person who's going to be there. I told one family, I said, well, unfortunately, he won't hear it, if that was his favorite song, and I hope that he got a chance to hear it as much as he could. But here are some, I made a little list. I'm sorry I didn't print this out, but I made a list of some of the most interesting, I'll say, requests that I have had at funerals. And I want you to think about yours. My way. I did it my way. This was for a man who had been very politically active in the city, and he wanted my way. Well, at the death of a young millennial, the family wanted my homie. Do you know my homie? Have you heard my homie? I think I went online and found it. My homie, it's a rap piece, and my homie means my homeboy or my friend, but my homie is the title of that. So, needless to say, we weren't able to do it. Well, I must say, we denied my homie, but I guess they said they'll show us, and so they actually had remarks, and they asked people, that had some, which is a very dangerous thing to do, as you know. And it became an open mic moment. So you know where this is going. And there were 3 people on the program that had been asked to give remarks that knew the deceased very closely, and there was a friend. And boy, I say some of those remarks, you almost have to be censored before they make them, because in some cases they can get pretty graphic and a little more, as they say, too much information to the people sitting there. Oh, TMI, a lot of TMI. Well, this young man came up to the thing, and he kind of slid up, and I told somebody, I said, I think we've got a problem. The open mic was not planned. It's not what we discussed doing. So the guy came up, and I noticed he had his cell phone, in his hand, and it was something about the cell phone that really kind of caught my attention, and so he got up and said his name and what his relationship was and how much he cared for this man. He was really like his homie. You may not know what homie means, and I know some people don't understand, what a homie is, because maybe we haven't been to school and college like we were talking. Like, okay, we just got shot, So he said, but he would want to hear this, and so he pulled the cell phone out and turned it on. And so for about 3.5, 4 minutes, we had to endure my homie. Well, the family was absolutely devastated. And you could feel the tension in the church because, he was missing. So finally, the presiding minister just came to the pulpit and had the mic turned up and said, thank you so much. We appreciate this and blah, blah, blah. So he was able to sit down. But I guess he felt that he had been vindicated because he got my homie, into that ceremony. Another one, are you ready for this one? It was a difficult situation. It was the funeral of an infant. And the family wanted lullaby. Lullaby and good night, da 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 da. So that was the request. Another very, very, colorful person asked for Up and Away in My Beautiful Balloon. Up and Away. Another one was I Believe I Can Fly. But here's the award winner, and this was recent. That was this year. My mother and the family had called me months before she passed when she was in hospice care. He said, I want to let you know now, we want you to be there for the funeral, blah, blah, blah. But Mom's favorite song, and she said that she wanted this sung at her funeral, Drown in My Own Tears. You know, the Ray Charles, Drown in My Own Tears. Well, needless to say, we didn't, meet that request. I suggested perhaps at the repast, that would be at another place, that this would be a great time to do in the atmosphere of that. They weren't too thrilled about that, but I think some of the other family members realized that they were about to be embarrassed if this was going to happen. Well, it wasn't going to happen, but these are just some of the considerations that happen in this. But Tom Long's book, Accompany Them with Singing, The Christian Funeral, the title actually comes from some early, believe it or not, Christian documents, the apostolic tradition, where it is describing how the early Christian church carried out funerals. And in the document, it said, it used the phrase let's see, let me read this so I can be accurate. In the accompany the dead to the grave while proclaiming the gospel. Accompany the dead to the grave while proclaiming the gospel. That's a powerful line, and so that's where the title came from, Accompany Them with Singing. I just left New Orleans this week, and early this week for a conference, and I had certainly hoped that I would be able to witness one of the New Orleans-style funerals. And of course, Tom actually talks about this in his book about the death. Have any of you ever experienced that? Have you experienced it? Tell us about your experience.
I've seen it. I haven't been part of it.
Yeah, well, or if you've seen it, just tell us about it.
And it's a procession, and it's not a sad procession. It's joyous. It's celebratory, and it's very respectful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Has anyone else seen it? And what's so interesting about that, people think about that and they think, oh, this is just a part of the New Orleans show and tradition. They don't realize how biblical it is, that what happens, and it is, as you said, in procession. So that from the actual place or the space of the burial, the people that have attended accompany the deceased to the grave, and they're singing, and it's kind of proclaiming the gospel. It's singing songs that encourage, that uplift, that comfort. But once the deceased has reached the grave and they return, it is a celebration. I mean, all the brass come out, the drums, and it's almost, people say, well, what are they so happy about? Somebody just died. But the tradition is that you are celebrating the death. You're celebrating. It is a big promotion. It's a move up. And brothers and sisters, this is where the idea and where our theology is tested to its greatest. What do you really believe about death and dying, death and life, death and resurrection? All of us have at some time lost loved ones that are near to us, and even with all the words we've used to comfort other people, somehow they don't really meet us quite at that time. But what is our hope as Christians who die in the Lord? This is what Tom says, and I will quote him. Early on in the book, he says this: to put it bluntly, a society that has forgotten how to honor the bodies of those who have departed is more inclined to neglect, even torture, the bodies of those still living. A society that has no firm hope for where the dead are going is also unsure how to take the hands of its children and lead them toward a hopeful future. So that even when you think about how do we see this transition, and how do we then celebrate this? Is this one that we just turn over to the bereavement, ministry, and they'll give us a report, and if my schedule permits, I will be there. If I can get a flight back in town, because I understand the mayor is going to be there, and there's some very important dignitaries that are scheduled to speak, and I certainly need to be there. But, the question is who is the deceased? Well, this lady has been a member of the church for about 50 years, and, she was a quiet lady, but nobody hardly knows her. Boy, that's the big celebration. That's the one that ought to fill the church. I can remember a couple of things that I think were very revealing to me and why this topic became so important to me. When I was a student at Morehouse College in the year that King Uzziah died, I recall one day receiving a call from the chair of the department to say that the church office, I had a church job. Ironically, I was the church organist at West Hunter Street Baptist Church, where then Reverend Ralph David Abernathy was the pastor. I also played at Ebenezer, of course, where Daddy King and all those folks were. So I had a very unique upbringing in Atlanta with the King and Abernathy family. The call came, about the chair of the department called and said, Mrs. Smith just called the office looking for you to tell you that they have a funeral on Wednesday at 11 o'clock. And I'm like, oh, Lord, okay, thanks. But he said, yeah, you have music history on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 11 o'clock, and you certainly don't need to miss it. So I said, well, so what am I going to do? And I said, well, he sounds so great. He's teaching. So I'm going through my mind to find out who I could get to play for this funeral at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday. And so he sat there and looked at me as if to say, well, so what are you going to do? And I said, well, maybe I could, no. Everybody that I thought of was either working in school or something. Nobody was just sitting at home saying, oh, I just play funerals. And so he finally, a little smile broke in his face, and he says, well, I'm available. I said, oh, no, Dr. Whalen, I couldn't ask you to do this. He said, well, she died, didn't she? And I said, yes. He said, well, I can go over and play the funeral. I do play the organ. I teach you. So I was just speechless that my teacher, the giant of my musical life, was going to go over to my church and play a funeral at 11 o'clock of someone that I really didn't know. So he said, well, call the lady back. She's waiting for you to call back. So sure enough, I called the church, and she was a very interesting secretary. Yes, Master, this is it. I said, well, that funeral's a little pocket there. We got to have something. I said, yes, ma'am, we have to have. I said, well, I found somebody to play. Well, I know you got class, but we have funerals over here. And I said, yes, ma'am. So she just was cutting me off. And Rowena said, and then he don't play. And so I said, yes, ma'am. I said, Dr. Whalen is going to come over. Dr. Whalen? Who you telling that? I mean, she wasn't really a big member. And so I said, he didn't ask if she was a big member. She just asked if she was deceased. Lord, well, I'll tell Reverend Abernathy, we wasn't expecting Dr. Whalen. It ain't one of those funerals. You got to save him for some. It was just the most ridiculous conversation. I'm serious, my brothers and sisters. I'm like, I don't believe this woman. I mean, I knew that she had studied with Lucifer's first son, at the Hellgate, University, but I just couldn't believe that this is what I was hearing on the phone. And so, sure enough, Dr. Whalen, and his grant went over and played the funeral, and Dr. Abernathy, everybody thought, you've got quite a substitute for something. I said, well, it was at 11 o'clock. I had a class. He reminded me that I had music history at 11 o'clock, and I couldn't come. And he said, well, he was available. He says, I do play the organ. And it was that experience. It was that experience that just set off something inside of me that there was nothing in terms of my job as a church organist more important than being at the funerals of the faithful. Now, I have to admit, when I got to Detroit, Hartford, 10,000 members, I turned those over to an associate, the weddings over to an associate. They said, well, you have to die for him to play for you. You don't play for no weddings. I said, ooh, I don't do weddings, I learned my lesson of weddings while I was young. Persons that go 3 hours because people can't walk. They want you to practice while they figure out how to walk. They can't pay me enough. So I said, now I'll play 10, 15 funerals to one wedding. And so I was just known for that, they just didn't even bother to call me. Now, if it was a funeral, I would come. It really had to be a very, very just unbelievable circumstance for me to miss a funeral. And here was what I later, in reading Tom Long's book that I've recommended to you, was that people talk about it. He talks about this in the book, about is it a good funeral? He said that there was some ministers who was talking. He says, well, I may not be the preacher that you are, but I do a good funeral. And so he says, well, he wasn't flattered that the minister was acknowledging his homiletical limitations, but he did a good funeral. So he said, well, what are the 4 elements or ingredients, or what are the ingredients of a good funeral? Tom has 4, and I want you to think about these. I really love this. The first that he says that is necessary is a holy person, or the deceased. Pretty much that's where it starts. A holy person, or the deceased. One who has died in the Lord. One who has professed his or her Christian belief and lives in that belief. So, a holy person, the deceased. Number 2, a holy place or sacred space. A holy or sacred space. Chapel, church, a place that has been hallowed as holy. 4th, a holy people. This is where it's going to get interesting. A holy people, the believers. A holy people, the believers. And finally, it says, a holy script. A holy script, or the gospel narrative. Those are the 4 elements for a good funeral. Obviously, one of the first questions as we rethink the Christian funeral is that we have to assess the deceased, those that die in the Lord. What is their hope? It becomes an opportunity to live the faith and to act out the gospel and what we believe about life, death, and resurrection. One that has grown up, Dante, you can appreciate this from the Pentecostal tradition as I did. Those that die in the Lord. It's not like we don't have hope as others do, because there's a hope that in the great resurrection, this is what we were taught as children, that our hope is built on that this is not our final home. The eschatological hope, now that's not popular now, eschatology, that's, we'll take that out of systematics, they don't, talk about eschatology, the eschaton. Well, what's that? We don't want, it's not about a place that, when you die, you fly high, in the sky, by and by. We want realized eschatology on the ground by the pound while we're still around. So that when we did, we're through, we're done. So there is no hope. There's no looking forward to another city. This is the thing that's so wonderful, particularly about the Negro spiritual. And certainly in some of the hymns of tenement, where there's always this stanza that talks about when I see Jesus, or when I go home, or my hope is built, or that celestial banquet, that great banquet, that great gathering at the table when we all dine with them. That hope, we don't sing about that. You know, other than some rural churches, we don't even sing I'll fly away, speaking of flying. When we all get to heaven, that's a spooky place. You know, we used to think, you know, you don't use the word hell, but now we don't even use the word heaven anymore in church. Because where we believe is right here. What you can touch, what you can inherit, what you got in your wallet, where you live, what you drive, your status. Those are the things that our postmodern culture has made important to us. So that dying in the Lord, that sounds like a science fiction movie. So eschatology has become something that we don't preach, we don't sing. And I believe that there are people who really struggle with where that is. That's a question, and I wouldn't dare challenge anyone's belief on that. But what does the deceased, the holy person, believe, and those around them in the celebration of their homegoing, their transition? Let me ask you some of the names that are used for funerals in your churches. I just used two: homegoing, celebration. Memorial.
Celebration of life.
Celebration of life. Service of death and resurrection. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Witness to the resurrection.
Witness to the resurrection. Wow, I like that. So the word resurrection comes in there. That sounds churchy. Do you realize someone has died here and you're talking about resurrection? It's not Easter. Are you following me? So that we separate what we believe from how we really celebrate the departed, the deceased, the holy person. Tom talks about a holy place as the second thing. Holy place, where do we assemble for this? Ideally, it's in the sanctuary. It may be in the chapel. In some churches, very large churches, chapels are more conducive for services. The number, depending on the side. Some churches some services are held at the actual funeral home, in the funeral home chapel. There have been some celebrations that people will go by certain places in nature. They want things out. They want to commit. These are their requests. But that the place becomes hallowed as holy. This place is holy. And in saying that, what does an unholy thing have showing up in a holy place? So unfortunately, that's why my way and my homie and drowning my own tears and some of the things that happen. Many of you may have been to services of people who were fraternity or sorority members or Masons, so they have to have their ceremony. And most of them are held prior to the actual service. And that if the service is on Wednesday, they have it Tuesday night, or it's the service is in the evening, they may have from 6 to 7 is that service, but then the memorial service or the funeral actually begins. So they get that out of the way because the rituals that are being used are not in fact holy. These are fraternal. So that holy space is important, and what it says about how we should conduct this service. Here comes the third one, the people. A holy people. A holy people. I was very, very convicted by this because for about 18 months I flew back and forth, and my soul looks back and wonders how I got over. But for 18 months I flew back and forth between Atlanta and Houston to serve in an interim position as director of music as the church was transitioning into their new big cathedral. Great great, wonderful experience. The pastor and I are very good friends. We did a lot of wonderful, wonderful things together. Just really had some very creative moments in terms of liturgy, great, great preaching, really the marriage of word and song. But it was always interesting to look at I think there were 3 campuses, and in both of the 3 campuses there were 18,000 members. Brothers and sisters, I have to admit, I got so tired of seeing people that I would go home and just sit in the dark by myself, just because I liked peace and quiet. Just people, as far as the eye of God can see, people. What do you do with all of these people? I would watch people come down the aisle and join the church, or in groups they would join the church. But I'll never forget one day there was a service, a funeral service, and I just happened to be there because someone else handled that. That was their job, and so I just happened to be there. They told, oh, you don't worry about that, you just do the music. We've got somebody who does funerals. We've got a list of soloists to call or whatever, so I won't, broke, don't mess with it, so. But I just decided to attend. And it was held in one of the little chapels there. When I walked in, I was, I think, the 11th person there, almost like a gathering like today. Only everybody was a little closer, and the deceased was here, which made it look worse, which made the room look empty. So here was a chapel, small chapel, that was almost empty. And I remember sitting there thinking what the contrast that this was compared to the Sunday that this young man joined the church, and these thousands of people were there celebrating and applauding, the fact that he'd given his life to Christ. But now, at his departure, there were just a few family, very few family, and a few friends in this church of 18,000 with 3 campuses. I had not read Tom's book at that time, but he pretty much goes on to suggest, and it was something that I shared with the pastor, that if you have that many people, everybody doesn't work. Everybody is not tied up at the times of these funerals. There needs to be a way that people are somehow activated or obligated to attend any service that comes up in the month of, so that you have anywhere from 100 to 200 people in a congregation that size who pretty much are just on standby that a believer has made his transition or her transition. And we will be there as people, so that the family looks around and see that he did not or she did not join, a pew to sit in or a chair to sit in among people who don't even know them or care for them. And certainly within the weeks, as services would come, these people would show up. Many of them, of course, were retired. Some of them weren't, but they didn't work during the day. They had evening shifts. So to run by the church and sit into the service that was going to only be about an hour, it began to fill up. So suddenly funerals started feeling like people were interested in this transition. In smaller churches, and I don't know what your situation, your local church is, you don't have to do anything that sophisticated. Just make sure that there are people who understand, and there are some people who, they don't have to know who they are, what they did, how they died, how long they've been a member, even if they are a member in some cases. But maybe the family, there's a family member, so this is someone, but that they show up, that they are there to accompany them with singing and proclaiming the gospel. In that their presence and showing up is already a proclamation of the gospel. That people are with you in these times. I have a dear friend, and she lost her husband in December, and her only grandchild their grandson, who they loved and spoiled to death, who was about 25 years old and just suddenly passed away in April. And I remember her calling me. She said, Jimmy, the 2 men of my life, in 6 months, I've lost everything. And we worried about her. We prayed with her. We were a big support to her. We're like her. We're her new sons and her new family. But she told me, she says, you know, I just am not ready to start going back to funerals for a while. She said, I need to leave that alone. I can't process that. Not understood. Didn't force that issue. But where people are really believers and understand this celebration of the resurrection, or witness to the resurrection, or whatever the celebration, we ought to be there to celebrate, to accompany them. Not only with singing, but in just our presence and our support. You know, many of us, if you know you can't be there, the first thing we want to do is send flowers. And you do know what happens to flowers once they now, when you get the bill, you get your credit card, you're like, oh, gee, what did they send? The entire Martha's Vineyard Island, you know, I mean, because this is the price. And then those wonderful plants are thrown off to the side. So perhaps even there we become more responsible for how we celebrate and what we accompany families with at that time. Truth of the matter, families are differently abled. You don't know when they're struggling just to deal with the expenses. And we have blessed the florist when we needed to bless the family. And these are decisions, but you got to have flowers. Well, trust me, they'll get flowers, but they will remember that bill, and they will remember all of the other things and expenses that come at those times. I won't get into the repast afterwards. That's not the purpose of this, but you know, the people, the fellowship, the witness, the idea of being in community and family. Finally, the one we talk about is the Holy Script. And that is that the gospel and what we believe is now put on display, put into action for those who are perhaps non-believers, that they understand what it is that we believe. It becomes an opportunity for the community to check out how we think, what we believe, where our faith is, what our creed is all about, how we deal with this. It becomes a moment that for the person who doesn't see it, what are they doing? They seem happy. Why were they happy? It becomes a moment, a teachable moment of what we believe and why we believe. Anybody want to add in something right there? Yeah, but a very important moment. Now, here are two terms I want you to define for me. Well, differentiate between a eulogy and a sermon.
Well, a eulogy is just a listing of life events. Or at least that's become the practice where we are.
So it's a listing of life events, or it is certainly the summary, it is the proclamation of the individual's life, his or her accomplishments from day one to the day they die. A eulogy that talks about them. Most of us pretty much will know what the sermon is, that it is a proclamation of the gospel. Now, the temptation, I'm sure, for preachers, and Tom has a chapter about that, about ingredients for the Christian sermon, or for preaching. So those of you who are preachers, that I will save that for you to deal with that, and I won't go into that. But there is a temptation in some denominations, I don't know, or in some faith traditions, to just say, well, the dead has lived their life, I've come to preach to the living, and they start preaching a hell and firestone, brimfire. If you don't live right and get your life together, you're going to hell. You want to see Jesus like them? We're going to open the doors of the church, and if you want to come right now, this is a service. It just comes to Sunday morning. Now, maybe we went a little too far through the red light, speeding and throwing trash out the window while swerving. But these are practices. Have any of you ever witnessed that? Been to a service where all of a sudden I'll tell you one that I'm still trying to get over. We went several years ago. We went to service. They had that. The preacher told them, "I'm not here to preach to the dead. He's lived his life. I can't say anything else about him. God, he's in the hand of a just God. But I'm preaching to those who are still remaining. And what God wants you to do and get your soul right with God." He went through it. He preached the very gates of hell underground. Told them they needed to come and give their life to God. And so that was one thing. And so people were sitting there, come down the aisle. It was, is there one? Is there one? Oh, and so, they sang the invitational hymns. Then they decided to take an offering. And so I was sitting next to my cousin, and I said, "Well, what do we do?" He said, "Give some money." He said, it's offering time, That's what you do. And the offering was to go to help the family in whatever way. And the church was, the deceased wife was just livid because she just did not thought that, they were begging or that they were, although the truth of the matter was they didn't need that money. But they just, and she had her son go up in the pulpit and let him know, announce that, this money's going to be given back to the church. And so folks started looking around and said, "Well, I'm going to give at my church Sunday. I'll come here and give at a funeral that they're going to give back to the church. I don't want to think about this church." So that was just an example of something that actually happened. So in thinking about the service itself and the worship, what does one do at a celebration of life and death, celebration of resurrection, witness to all these things? What happens? What goes on in this celebration? Anybody? Let's open it up to become. Let's let this become a dialogue. What do we do? I'll start. We sing.
Read scripture.
We definitely read scripture. We pray.
We sometimes have responsive readings of scripture.
Okay. Or reading of the proclamation of the word. Absolutely.
There's sometimes soloists or ensembles besides the congregations.
Again, the importance of the congregation, even in the singing of hymns. There's nothing worse than at a service like that, singing a hymn and there's nobody there to sing along with it. You have kind of a makeshift choir of people who have come. We had that at the church that I served once. They were called the Consolation Choir. They had a nickname that the congregation gave, but they were known as the Consolation Choir. And I have to admit, in some cases, they really uplifted the people in the congregation. The family. They would just kind of look up and get a nice grin and smile. What a grin we have in Jesus. Dropping books upside down. Rollers, stones, backwards. They were the Consolation Choir. And they were faithful to come out to be in the choir loft. I was there to play. Many times we're not even choir members. These are just people who were available. Occasionally, a lady asked me, she said, "Excuse me, isn't the organ a little too loud?" I said, "Yes, it probably is. We've been having problems." I wonder if they can hear us. I said, we hope. But just the singing, intentional singing. And I know that's difficult. It's not like the whole choir could be there. And it's so interesting. Several years ago at this same church, there was a very, very controversial murder that happened in the city. And it actually made national news. I was in Detroit at the time. So the pastor of the church was out of town, and I think I was in town. And certainly there was no reason for us to think that we were going to get hit up for the place for the funeral. And so sure enough, I just happened to be watching the news, and they were announcing that, the tragic so-and-so, but the funeral of Mr. So-and-so will be held on Saturday, on Friday morning at 11 o'clock a.m. at the Hartford Memorial Baptist Church. I'm like, whoa, what? And so the phone started ringing, people started, what is this? And they said that they want the choir. CNN's gonna be there, CBS is gonna be there, ABC, CDE, F and G, and XYZ, all of them are coming. And I have to admit, brothers and sisters, I don't think I had seen my choir show up like that on a Sunday morning. Oh, they packed up in that choir loft. It was a scene for CNN, that's for sure. We didn't know the man. I'm not sure what the connection was, but it was the biggest thing that happened. Pastor flew back in to do the eulogy. And you would think we turned him into a saint. Only problem, 2 or 3 months later, after the investigation, we were like, but they just asked he was at church. He wasn't really a film. But we sent him away. You talk about Accompany Them, let's sing it. Yeah, he couldn't get a seat on the parking lot. It was the big attraction. This service of this young man who had been cut down on the east side. And we were on the west side, so that was quite an interesting thing. But sometimes we are guilty of giving more to these big special occasions or these funerals or families or people of prominence and not really thinking about every member of our congregation. Back to the Whalum story. When he asked me, he said, well, she died, didn't she? I don't know who she is, it doesn't matter. There's a service. There's a family, there are people there that will be grieving. But we hope, and God knows if any of you had services where there were little or no family there. Yeah, that's a tough moment. And it is at those moments when those kinds of things of the congregation being able to be that kind of family become much more important and critical. Now, you said, wow, this sure was a downer breakout session. But I'll tell you what, imagine that death angel coming to your door or the door of one of your family members. And that same occasion has to take place. And the considerations of all of these things and others are just not important. Or we again send them to Reverend Packwood, you'll do that. Incidentally, and there have been times when I've been out of town and wasn't able to play, and boy, I just, was looking for somewhere else to move because, they still look at me. Now, you wasn't here when my mother passed. Always traveling. Didn't you know my mother was going to pass, But that was important. It was a great service, We didn't, my absence did not have anything to do with the quality of the service, but I just wasn't there. So she ain't completely dead yet, So these are real important factors or considerations. Now in these last moments, I want to open your reaction to this. Perhaps you're thinking of, why did you decide to come this morning to a session like this that is not the most uplifting, but certainly I hope that will make you think about what services ought to be. I will say this about the singing. There was a study done. In fact, Tom told me, he said, Jimmy, after I finished the book, I regret that we didn't at least collaborate on a part that was related specifically to the music, which it does not really. With a title like that, you kind of expect it to do that. He does deal with the fact, he talks very extensively about the treatment of the body, how, believe it or not, cremation rates are up. At the time of his writing, I think he said that the state of Nevada had like a 66% cremation rate. The smallest was, I think, Mississippi with either like 9% or 11%. So that has probably changed over the years since his research. But that more people are going to, choosing cremation, sometimes economic reasons. But there are other things, how they celebrate the difference between a memorial service, of course, and a funeral, in that a memorial service means the absence of the body or the deceased actual physical presence in the place versus a funeral, or his studies showed that what was beginning to be the greatest attended celebrations were these kind of family hours, where the kind of eulogistic experiences were coming out, where people could tell friends, like, about my home, whatever, family, so permitted. But that somehow these services were becoming the preferred, where people could really show their gratitude, be closer to the family, as opposed to the 1 hour celebration or the worship or the celebrations, which we've talked about. So a lot of those kinds of details are in that book. But I certainly think that each one of you I know each one of you has your own stories, but just let me have some of your reactions to what we've just discussed. My brother?
There are some services that you do, well, not services complete, but some part, like when you're gonna present a child, or a wedding, or a funeral. And when it comes to do the program, it's because it's right there. So it's a very little time to explain the family. In my church, we are like 3,000 members. So it's not like you can bump to each other all the time. Sometimes you don't even know some of the members. And if you want to, like, they always have their own ideas. One time we had this child presentation, and we got more special songs for children than we had the whole year in the church. And it took so long that we couldn't do anything else that day in church. So you have to explain sometimes in the church what the services are going to be about, even though that you don't have it in the moment. Because if you are in the moment, it's too late. They already have their own program, they have their own choices, or you get in a fight with them, or you just do whatever they want to do.
I'm so glad you raised that point. So imagine that, Reverend Packwood, imagine his situation coming to you, and you're the person that has, how do you deal with it?
I have on occasion included some of the things that a family requested. In this particular case, it was a gentleman who had been a long time member of the church. His life was simplified, his faith in Christ, and these were meaningful things for the family. And while that did not take over the witness of the resurrection, it was something that was comforting to him, and that's why I included it.
Others of you, please speak up.
Well, I wonder, so how do we as Christians, when you have to handle the non-Christian funeral, right? So that's also a case we have to end up dealing with. And how do we, I guess what are suggestions as far as handling those funerals that may not necessarily be Christian, or there's nobody to attest to a Christian witness that this person has made? This is a holy person. Let's presume for a second that there is some such thing as a non-holy person. So that's the case we're dealing with. What then do you do in an effort to be helpful and to uplift those family without, I guess, bearing false witness or putting something superficial together? Just like in the case that you said that one funeral, you sent the guy home and you realize later on, well, it made the conflict.
Well, I think that's where That's why these services and these kind of discussions generally fall under pastoral care. If any of you are seminary, have been to seminary, these are the discussions that they invariably have in pastoral care. I think they are equally as important in worship, as well as just any number of things, because people, particularly for the sermon, the eulogy, you try to collect as much information about the deceased, and you must be very discerning about what you can and can't do. I've got another story I don't want to tell. It turned out to the chapel, where we didn't know who the person was. The minister on duty was, sending the deceased on, straight to the throne of Christ. We noticed that some of the people attending, looked like they may have just gotten off work, the night before, came straight to the funeral. And one lady hollered out, "He used to beat me!" And so the church just shattered. So I was like, okay, Minyadi, you better bring this in, And so he said, "There are some things that we do not understand in life." And I said, I just started playing softly on the organ. We're done. What's happening? Let's call it. I started ringing the chimes. Time to get on out, because there was nothing. But clearly he did not know the deceased. He did not know what happened. Of course, this lady's overwhelming emotion, that just, shattered the situation. But I think it's in that case you have to be very careful how you, that you talk about a moment in pastoral care. Because when people come to the church, here's another thing that's very interesting. I would have talked about weddings. Do you know there are probably fewer weddings being held in churches today than there was, let's say, a decade ago? The big thing now is destination weddings. So people will spend tons of money going to the islands or to the destination or whatever. Many of them because they don't want to deal with all of your rules and regulations in the church. Or people who say, I am much more spiritual than I am religious. So I don't want all of the religious stuff with the trappings. We want to be at Cancun on the beach at sunrise, and whatever. So they don't even, other than the minister who might get a nice little vacation, who's doing the wedding, they don't even need anything that you're doing. So, but when people choose to come to the church, it is a holy place. And we certainly cannot be judgmental, but I think that's where it takes a lot of pastoral sensitivity to how you deal with this. Even the text, because this again becomes those teachable moments where you're not preaching to them, you're not becoming an evangelist to the point that you need to get your heart right with God. Not like him, but you need to, he's lived his life, but you got hope. It doesn't become that kind of moment. But there certainly is a lot of room to be had in terms of the discussion, and teaching, and planning, in pastoral care as well as in worship, understanding about those kinds of things, because they do happen. Now, many churches do have templates, or they have certain rules and very, very rigid regulations about funerals. And so this is what you do. This, as you said, you may incorporate some things, but we don't do this, we don't do that. And of course, at that point, you have to give them the option. Years ago at my church in Detroit, we had a policy, absolutely no secular music at weddings. But now we have a kind of neo-Gothic, beautiful, sanctuary. So everybody, imagine wanting to be married, coming down that long aisle, the pipe organ and all this stuff in the church. So it was one of those destination places. They just didn't like our destination rules. You mean we can't have, here comes the bride, and so when you explain where it comes from, we said no secular music. So Wagner certainly was not writing, a piece for his daughter coming down the aisle of the Vatican. It was not that kind of, Sarah Benjamin, we talked about that, Midsummer Night Dream, the Wedding March, where it comes from. So there were other pieces. What can you use? this sound, so it really, there was quite a resistance and pushback until they discovered what the alternatives were. And then later on, many of them come back, ours, but I told my friend, I didn't want my wedding like everybody else. I like that music. I like different music. I said, yeah, a change has come over you. But, it didn't start out that way. But I understand years later they have had to relax that policy because, perhaps the strong arm of the people have changed it so they're doing a little bit of everything. So it's like, you light up my light until the fire goes out. You make me feel brand new until it gets old, love soft as an easy chair until it turns into a hard rock. So these things are now, we sang this song when we first met. This was the song playing. And I said, boy, that's a great piece for the reception.
Right.
That, you really, and then you just start talking about how they can plan this into the reception. I hadn't thought about that. And you want the ceremony, wedding ceremonies are not meant to be everlasting. Nor are funerals. Things that are eternal don't have to be everlasting in a church service. But then, what happens, Lord, when you see remarks or condolence, now, some of you all don't know this because you're much too sophisticated. I grew up in a little town in West Virginia. And so what they used to do when they would get funerals, they would have the little lady who would read all the cards and telegrams and all of the acknowledgments. She would read the flowers and everything else, and she would have her hat and her, she'd be up there. She'd come up with a whole arm full of things that she had to read. And I said, I wonder if they still do that. She would literally read cards. In your hour of bereavement, we so-and-so and so-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, to the family. So-and-so, and she would literally read all 20 of the cards. Telegram. Mrs. So, we regret the passing of you, and they would go. Resolutions. We be it resolved that Miss Fanny Crump be placed in the archives of the church. I mean, our archives. And this will go on. I mean, on and on. You could go out, have coffee, come back. She's still going. But that was what they did. And if you didn't do that, they would feel like you hadn't had a complete service. So I hope this is helpful to you, and that these will think, and that as you go back home, you might really consider these and how you might be more effective in your witness at these very, very difficult times, but in these times that are guaranteed to happen. Thank you so much.